John Adams and his wife Abigail Smith Adams exchanged over 1,100 letters between the years of 1762 and 1804. Though during that period he would become one of the authors of the Declaration of Independence, a two-term vice president to George Washington, and the second president of the United States. He would always treat Abigail as his intellectual equal, which she was. They met in 1759 when she was 15 years old and he 24. Though initial impressions between them were not favorable, they developed a growing affection for one another and were married 5 years later, in October of 1764, despite opposition from her mother. In these letters, you'll notice that they have pen names for one another. She, his Diana, Roman goddess of the moon, and he, Lysander, the Spartan hero. Not only are these names used as terms of endearment, but they also display a shared knowledge and appreciation of history and literature. We pick up the story in 1764, just 6 months before their wedding. Abigail is living in her family home in Weymouth, and John is living in Braintree on a farm he'd recently inherited from his father. The colonies were in the midst of another smallpox outbreak. Since the disease was introduced to Massachusetts in Plymouth in 1633, there had been at least a half a dozen outbreaks over the years. The most severe one in Boston, starting in 1721, was so bad that the entire city was ultimately evacuated. Unfortunately, that had the unintended effect of spreading the infection to the rest of the 13 colonies. This was more than an inconvenience, as smallpox is estimated to be responsible for the deaths of 300 to 500 million people during the 20th century alone. During the time of these letters, smallpox inoculations had been going on for several decades, but were still controversial in spite of their high success rate. That said, they were not to be taken lightly. Though you had a good chance of living through an inoculation, you were likely going to suffer a mild infection, which could be very uncomfortable and last many weeks. John is preparing for a smallpox inoculation.
Weymouth, April 7th, 1764. Sir, how do you do now? For my part, I feel much easier than I did an hour ago, my uncle having given me a more particular and favorable account of the smallpox, or rather the operation of the preparation, than I have had before. He speaks greatly in favor of Dr. Perkins, who has not, as he has heard, lost one patient. Keep your spirits up, and I make no doubt that you will do well enough. Shall I come and see you before you go? No, I won't, for I want not again to experience what I this morning felt when you left your A. Smith.
Braintree, April 7th, 1764. My dear Diana, for many years past I have not felt more serenely than I do this evening. My head is clear and my heart is at ease. Business of every kind I have banished from my thoughts. My room is prepared for a 7 days' retirement, and my plan is digested for 4 or 5 weeks. My brother retreats with me to our preparatory hospital and is determined to keep me company through the smallpox. For I assure you sincerely that, as nothing which I before expected from the distemper gave me more concern than the thought of a 6 weeks' separation from my Diana, my departure from your house this morning made an impression upon me that was severely painful. I thought I left you in tears and anxiety, and was very glad to hear by your letter that your fears were abated. For my own part, I believe no man ever undertook to prepare himself for the smallpox with fewer reservations than I have at present. Any other fear from the smallpox or its appurtenances in the modern way of inoculation I never had in my life. Next Friday, we take our departure for Boston, and I have not the least doubt of a pleasant 3 weeks, notwithstanding the distemper. Good night, my dear. I'm going to bed. April 8th. The people all gone to meeting, but myself and companion, who are enjoying a pipe in great tranquility after the operation of our ipecac. Did you ever see 2 persons in one room ipecacuaned together? I hope I have not spelled that ineffable word amiss. I assure you, they make merry diversion. We took turns to be sick and to laugh. When my companion was sick, I laughed at him, and when I was sick, he laughed at me. Once, however, and only once, we were both sick together, and then all laughter and good humor deserted the room. Upon my word, we both felt very sober. But all is now easy and agreeable. We have had our breakfast, and are seated to our pipes and our books as happily as mortals preparing for the smallpox can desire. April 9th. Every letter I receive from you, as it is an additional evidence of your kindness to me, and as it gives me fresh spirits and great pleasure, confers an additional obligation upon me. You may rely upon it. I shall strictly pursue the doctor's directions without the least deviation. I have not felt freer from all kinds of pain and uneasiness. I have not enjoyed a clearer head or a brisker flow of spirits these 7 years than I do this day. My garden and my farm, if I may call what I have by that name, give me now and then a little regret, as I must leave them in more disorder than I could wish. But the dear partner of all my joys and sorrows, in whose affections and friendship I glory more than in all other emoluments under heaven, comes into my mind very often and makes me sigh. Pray continue to write me by every opportunity, for, next to conversation, correspondence with you is the greatest pleasure in the world. To your John Adams.
April 8th. Sir, let me know whether you took your vomit, whether you have got your pills, and whether you have begun Lent, how it suits you. I am very fearful that you will not, when left to your own management, follow your directions, but let her who tenderly cares for you both in sickness and in health entreat you to be careful of that health upon which depends the happiness of your A. Smith.
April 11th. My ever dear Diana, abstinence from all but the cool and the soft has hitherto agreed with me very well. I have not yet once transgressed in a single iota. The medicine we have taken is far from being loathsome or painful or troublesome, as I own I expected. And if I could but enjoy my retreat in silence and solitude, there would be nothing wanting but obliviscence of your ladyship to make me as happy as a monk in a cloister or a hermit in his cell. You will wonder, perhaps, at my calling in monks and hermits on this occasion, and may doubt upon the happiness of their situations. Yet give me leave to tell you freely, the former of these are so totally absorbed in devotion, and the latter in meditation, and such an appetite, such a passion for the respective employments and pleasures grows habitually up in their minds, that no mortals, excepting him who hopes to be bound to your ladyship in the soft ligaments of matrimony, has a better security for happiness than they. I should be glad to see you in this house, but there is another very near it, where I should rejoice much more to see you, and to live with you till we shall have lived enough to ourselves, to glory, virtue, and mankind, until both of us shall be desirous of translation to a wiser, fairer, better world. I am, and till then and forever after will be your admirer and friend and lover, John Adams.
April 12th. My dearest friend, here I am all alone in my chamber, a mere nun, I assure you. After professing myself thus, will it not be out of character to confess that my thoughts are often employed about Lysander? Out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaketh, and why not the mind thinketh? How kind it is in you, thus by frequent tokens of remembrance, to alleviate the pangs of absence. By this I am convinced that I am often in your thoughts, which is a satisfaction to me. Notwithstanding, you tell me that you sometimes view the dark side of your Diana, and there no doubt you discover many spots, which I rather wish were erased than concealed from you. Do not judge by this that your opinion is an indifferent thing to me, but it is far other ways, for I had rather stand fair there and be thought well of by Lysander than by a greater part of the world beside. I would fain hope that those faults which you discover proceed more from a wrong head than a bad heart. Ere long may I be connected with a friend from whose example I may form a more faultless conduct, and whose benevolent mind will lead him to pardon what he cannot amend. I know you are a critical observer, and your judgment of people generally pleases me. Sometimes, you know, I think you are too severe, and that you do not quite make so many allowances as human nature requires, but perhaps this may be owing to my unacquaintedness with the world. Your business naturally lends you to a nearer inspection of mankind, and to see the corruptions of the heart, which I believe you often find desperately wicked and deceitful. Methinks I have an abundance to say to you. What is next? Oh, that I should have been extremely glad to have seen you today. Tomorrow you leave Braintree. My best wishes attend you. With Marcia I say, O ye immortal powers, that guard the just, watch round his head and soften the disease, banish all sorrow from his mind, becalm his soul with pleasing thoughts, and show mankind that virtue is your care. Thus, for Lysander prays his A. Smith. P.S. Let me hear from you soon as possible, and as often. I send you some tobacco to smoke your letters over, though I don't imagine you will use it all that way. A pleasant ride to you. Breakfast calls, your A. Smith.
Boston, April 13th. My dearest, the doctor came in a chaise, and after an apology for not recollecting what Dr. Tufts had told him, Dr. Perkins demanded my left arm and Dr. Warren my brother's. They took their lancets and with their points divided the skin for about 1/4 of an inch, and just suffering the blood to appear, buried a thread about 1/4 of an inch long in the channel. A little lint was then laid over the scratch and a piece of rag pressed on, and then a bandage bound over all. My coat and waistcoat put on, and I was bid to go where and do what I pleased. Don't you think the doctor has a good deal of confidence in my discretion thus to leave me to it? I have one request to make, which is that you would be very careful in making Tom smoke all the letters from me, very carefully, before you or any of the family reads them. For although I shall never fail to smoke them myself before sealing, yet I fear the air in this house will be too much infected soon to be absolutely without danger, and I would not you should take the distemper by letter from me for millions. I write at a desk far removed from any sick room, and shall use the care I can, but too much cannot be used. I am, as ever, your John Adams. April 14th. The operation has been performed and all well, and now our hospital is full. There are 10 of us under this roof, now expecting to be sick. One of us, Mr. Wheat, begins to complain of a pain under his arm and in his knees and about his back, so that we expect within a few hours to see the course of the eruption and of the fever that precedes and accompanies it. I fear I must write less than I have done. The doctors don't approve it. They will allow of nothing scarcely but the card table, checkerboard, flute, violin, and singing, unless tittle-tattle, roll and tumble, shuttlecock, etc. Pray write as often as you can to your John Adams.
April 16th. My friend, I write to you every day. Shall I not make my letters very cheap? Don't you light your pipe with them? I care not if you do. 'Tis a pleasure to me to write. Yet I wonder I write to you with so little restraint, for as a critic, I fear you more than any other person on earth, and 'tis the only character in which I ever did, or ever will, fear you. What say you? Do you approve of that speech? Don't you think me a courageous being? Courage is laudable, a glorious virtue in your sex. Why not in mine? For my part, I think you ought to applaud me for mine. And now, pray, tell me how you do. Do you feel any venom working in your veins? Did you ever before experience such a feeling? This letter will be made up of questions, I fancy, not set in order before you neither. How do you employ yourself? Do you go abroad yet? Is it not cruel to bestow those favors upon others which I should rejoice to receive, yet must be deprived of? Adieu. Evermore remember me with the tenderest affection, which is also borne unto you by your A. Smith.
April 17th. You can't imagine how finely my brother and I live. We have as much bread and as much new pure milk, as much pudding and rice, and indeed as much of everything of the farinaceous kind as we please, and the medicine we take is not at all nauseous or painful. Messrs. Quincy's, Samuel, and Josiah have the distemper very lightly. I asked Dr. Perkins how they had it. The doctor answered in the style of the faculty, "Oh, Lord, sir, infinitely light." "It is extremely pleasing," says he. "Wherever we go, we see everybody passing through this tremendous distemper in the lightest, easiest manner conceivable." The doctor meant those who have the distemper by inoculation in the new method. For those who have it in the natural way are objects of as much horror as ever. There is a poor man in this neighborhood now laboring with it in the natural way. He is in a good way of recovery, but is the most shocking sight that can be seen. They say he is no more like a man than he is like a hog or a horse, swelled to 3 times his size, black as bacon, blind as a stone. I had, when I was first inoculated, a great curiosity to go and see him, but the doctor said I had better not go out, and my friends thought it would give me a disagreeable turn. My uncle brought up one who has just recovered of it in the natural way to see us and show us. His face is torn all to pieces and is as rugged as Braintree Commons. This contrast is forever before the eyes of the whole town. Yet it is said there are 500 persons who expose themselves to this distemper in the natural way. Is man a rational creature, think you? I should think myself a deliberate self-murderer if I should stay in this town and run the chance of having it in the natural way. Every one of us are wishing that his turn might come next, that it might be over, and we about our business, and I return to my farm, my garden, but above all to my Diana, who is the best of all friends and the richest of all blessings to her own Lysander. Later that same day, April 17th. I never receive a line from you without a revivification of spirits and a joyful heart. I long to hear that something you promised to tell me in your next. What can that thing be, thought I. My busy fancy will be speculating and conjecturing about it night and day, I suppose, till your next letter shall unriddle the mystery. You are wanton, malicious. What shall I call you for putting me in this puzzle and tease for a day or two when you might have informed me in a minute? You had best reconsider and retract that bold speech of yours, I assure you. For I assure you there is another character, besides that of critic, in which, if you never did, you always hereafter shall fear me, or I will know the reason why. Oh, now I think on it, I am determined very soon to write you an account, in minute detail, of the many faults I have observed in you. You remember I gave you a hint that I had observed some in one of my former letters. You'll be surprised when you come to find the number of them. By the way, I have heard since I came to town an insinuation to your disadvantage, which I will inform you of as soon as you have unraveled your enigma. With unalterable affection, your J. Adams.
April 19th. Why, my good man, thou hast the curiosity of a girl. Who could have believed that only a slight hint would have set thy imagination agig in such a manner? And a fine encouragement I have to unravel the mystery, as thou callest it. Nothing less, truly, than to be told something to my disadvantage. What an excellent reward that will be! In what court of justice didst thou learn that equity? As to the insinuation, it doth not give me any uneasiness, for if it is anything very bad, I know that thou dost not believe it. I am not conscious of any harm that I have done or wished to any mortal. I bear no malice to any being. To my enemies, if I have any, I am willing to afford assistance. Therefore, towards man I maintain a conscience devoid of offense. Yet, by this I mean not that I am faultless, but tell me, what is the reason that persons had rather acknowledge themselves guilty than be accused by others? There is something which makes it more agreeable to condemn ourselves than to be condemned by others. But although it is vastly disagreeable to be accused of faults, yet no person ought to be offended when such accusations are delivered in the spirit of friendship. I now call upon you to fulfill your promise and tell me all my faults, both of omission and commission, and all the evil you either know or think of me. Be to me a second conscience. There can be no time more proper than the present. It will be harder to erase them when habit has strengthened and confirmed them. Do not think I trifle. These are really meant as words of truth and soberness. For the present, good night.
April 18th. Dear Diana, 3 of our company have now the smallpox upon them. We have seen them for 2 or 3 days each, wading through headaches, backaches, knee aches, gagging, and fever, to their present state of an indisputable eruption, cheerful spirits, coming appetites, and increasing strength. Huntington begins to complain and look languid. Our turn comes next. We have completed 5 days since inoculation, and have as yet felt no pains, nor languors from pox, or medicine worth mentioning. Indeed, what the others have suffered is a mere trifle. They arise every day with the rest, having slept as soundly as the rest, eat and drink with the rest, walk about the chamber and chat with the rest, excepting that they love lolling and tumbling on the bed rather more than the rest, and are somewhat less sociable and more fretful, groan a little oftener, and wish to see the doctor. But as soon as the pock is out, these pains depart, and their spirits rise, tongues run, and they eat, drink, laugh, and sport like prisoners released. Sylvia wants the pen, and I'm weary of it, so I will use it no more than to subscribe the name of Lysander.
April 20th. What does it signify? Why may not I visit you a days as well as nights? I no sooner close my eyes than some invisible being, swift as the albarak of Mahomet, bears me to you. I see you, but I cannot make myself visible to you. That tortures me. But it is still worse when I do not come, for I am then haunted by 6 ugly sprites. One will catch me and leap me into the sea. Another will carry me up a precipice, like that which Edgar describes to Lear, and then toss me down. And were I not then light, I should shiver into atoms. Another will be pouring down my throat stuff worse than the witch's broth in Macbeth. Where shall I be carried next? I know not. But I had rather have the smallpox by inoculation 6 times than be sprited about as I am. What say you? Can you give me any encouragement to come? But my own inclinations must not be followed. To duty I sacrifice them. For the present, goodbye. Later that evening, I hope you smoke your letters well before you deliver them. Mamma is so fearful lest I should catch the distemper that she hardly ever thinks the letters are sufficiently purified. Did you never rob a bird's nest? Do you remember how the poor bird would fly round and round, fearful to come nigh, yet not know how to leave the place? Just so, they say, I hover round Tom while he was smoking my letters. But heyday, Mr. What's-Your-Name, who taught you to threaten so vehemently? A character besides that of critic, in which, if I never did, I always hereafter shall fear you. Thou canst not prove a villain. Impossible! I therefore still insist upon it, that I neither do nor can fear thee. For my part, I know not that there is any pleasure in being feared, but if there is, I hope you will be so generous as to fear your Diana, that she may at least be made sensible of the pleasure. Tomorrow marks the 14th day. How many more are to come? I dare not trust myself with the thought. Adieu. Let me hear from you by Mr. Ayres, and excuse this very bad writing. If you had mended my pen, it would have been better. Once more adieu. Gold and silver have I none, but such as I have give I unto thee, which is the affectionate regard of your A. Smith.
April 26th. Many have been the particular reasons against my writing for several days past, but one general reason has prevailed with me more than any other thing, and that was an absolute fear to send a paper from this house as much infected as it is to any person liable to take the distemper, but especially to you. I am infected myself, and every room in the house has infected people in it, so that there is real danger in writing. I was comfortable, and have never been otherwise. I believe none of the race of Adam ever passed the smallpox with fewer pains, aches, qualms, or with less smart than I have done, and I am returning gradually to my former method of living. Such we have reason to be thankful has been our felicity, but others in the same house have not been so happy. Pretty high fevers and severe pains, and a pretty plentiful eruption has been the portion of 3 of our companions. I join with you sincerely in your lamentation that you are not inoculated. I wish to God the doctor would set up a hospital in Germantown and inoculate you. I will come and nurse you. Nay, I will go with you anywhere and attend you. You say rightly, safety there is not, and I say safety there will never be. And parents must be lost in avarice or blindness who restrain their children. However, be careful of taking the infection unawares. For all the mountains of Peru or Mexico, I would not that this letter or any other instrument should convey the infection to you. I hope soon to see you. Meantime, write as often as possible to yours, John Adams. P.S. Don't conclude from anything I have written that I think inoculation is a light matter. A long and total abstinence from everything in nature that has any taste, 2 heavy vomits, 1 heavy cathartic, 24 mercurial and antimonial pills, and 3 weeks close confinement to a house are, according to my estimation of things, no small matters. However, who would not cheerfully submit to them rather than pass his whole life in continual fears, in subjection, under bondage?
April 30th. Dear Lysander, your friendly epistle came like an infernal messenger through fire and brimstone. Yet it brought me tidings of great joy. With gratitude may this month ever be remembered by a Diana. You have been peculiarly favored and may be numbered with those who have had the distemper lightest. What would I give that I was as well through it? Oh, by the way, you have not told me that insinuation to my disadvantage which you promised me. Now, methinks I see you criticizing. What upon earth is the girl after? One part of this sentence brought to mind the accusation of haughtiness, and your faults naturally led me to think of my own. But here, look ye, I have more than insinuations against you. An intolerable, forbidding, expected silence which lays such a restraint upon but moderate modesty that 'tis impossible for a stranger to be tranquil in your presence. What say you to that charge? Deny it not, for by your experience I know it to be true. Yet to this day I feel a greater restraint in your company than I did in almost any other person on earth, but thought I had reasons by myself to account for it, and knew not that others were affected in the same manner, till a late complaint was entered against you. Is there anything austere in your countenance? Indeed, I cannot recollect anything. Yet when I have been most pained, I have thoroughly studied it, but never could discover one trace of the severe. Must it not then be something in behavior? Else why should not I feel as great restraint when I write? Unsociable being is another charge. Bid a lady hold her tongue when she is tenderly inquiring after your welfare? Why, that sounds like want of breeding. It looks not like Lysander, for it wears the face of ingratitude. I expect you to clear up these matters without being in the least saucy. As to the charge of haughtiness, I am certain that is a mistake, for if I know anything of Lysander, he has as little of that in his disposition as he has of ill nature. But for sauciness, no mortal can match him. No, not even his Diana. May 4th. Your desire that I would write at every opportunity is punctually observed by me, and I comply with your request, although I have nothing more to say than, how do ye, and when will you return? These questions perhaps may appear trifling to others, yet to me they are matters of the highest importance. I greatly rejoice to find you are so comfortable, as well as the rest of my friends. Myra, I hear, is to return next week, and will not Lysander too? Yet do not, till you can come with the greatest safety. For should I see thee, were I imprisoned even in a paradise, I should leap the crystal walls. For all those pleasurable sensations which you were so pleased to say a letter from your Diana gave you, are enjoyed by her when Lysander favors her with an epistle, and in as much greater a degree as his are more worthy than hers. Yet though he exceeds her there, he cannot in a tenderer affection than that which is borne him by his A. Smith.
May 4th. Of my hospital companions, we are all well but one, who is more hysterical than any ancient maiden in the gout. A history of his oddities would be a curiosity, but the man is in no danger. His smallpox is all gone, and he can eat his pint of chocolate and his bowl of claret sangry as well as any man. May 7th. I promised you, some time agone, a catalogue of your faults, imperfections, defects, or whatever you please to call them. I feel at present pretty much at leisure and in a very suitable frame of mind to perform my promise. But I must caution you, before I proceed, to recollect yourself, and instead of being vexed or fretted or thrown into a passion, to resolve upon a reformation. For this is my sincere aim in laying before you this picture of yourself. In the first place, then, give me leave to say, you have been extremely negligent in attending so little to cards. You have very little inclination to that noble and elegant diversion, and whenever you have taken a hand, you have held it but awkwardly, and played it with a very uncourtly and indifferent air. Now I have confidence enough in your good sense to rely upon it. You will for the future endeavor to make a better figure in this elegant and necessary accomplishment. Another thing which ought to be mentioned, and by all means amended, is the effect of a country life and education. I mean a certain modesty, sensibility, bashfulness, call it by which of these names you will, that enkindles blushes, forsooth, at every violation of decency and company, and lays most insupportable constraint on the freedom of behavior. In the third place, you could never yet be prevailed on to learn to sing. This I take very soberly to be an imperfection of the most of any. An ear for music would be a source of much pleasure, and a voice and skill would be a private solitary amusement of great value when no other could be had. In the fourth place, you very often hang your head like a bulrush. You do not sit erected as you ought, by which means it happens that you appear too short for a beauty, and the company loses the sweet smiles of that countenance and the bright sparkles of those eyes. This fault is the effect and consequence of another still more inexcusable in a lady. I mean a habit of reading, writing, and thinking, but both the cause and effect ought to be repented and amended as soon as possible. Another fault, which seems to have been obstinately persisted in, after frequent remonstrances, advices, and admonitions of your friends, is that of sitting with your legs across. This ruins the figure and the air. This injures the health, and springs, I fear, from the former source, namely, too much thinking. These things ought not to be. A sixth imperfection is that of walking with the toes bending inward. This imperfection is commonly called parrot-toed, I think, I know not for what reason, but it gives an idea, the reverse of a bold and noble air, the reverse of a stately strut, and the sublime deportment. Thus, I have given a faithful portraiture of all the spots I've hitherto discerned in this luminary. Have not regarded order, but have painted them as they arose in my memory. Near 3 weeks I have conned and studied for more, but more are not to be discovered. All the rest is bright and luminous. Having finished the picture, I finish my letter, lest while I am recounting faults, I should commit the greatest in a letter, that of tedious and excessive length. There's a prettily turned conclusion for you, from your Lysander. May 8th. Dear Diana, I come home tomorrow, but when I shall see Diana is uncertain. In the warfare between inclination and prudence, I believe prudence must prevail, especially as that virtue will in this case be seconded by the sincerest of all affections, that of Lysander for Diana. Lysander.
May 9th. Welcome, welcome, thrice welcome is Lysander to Braintree. May not I come and see you, at least look through a window at you? Should you not be glad to see your Diana? I flatter myself you would. Your brother brought your letter. I thank you for your catalogue, but must confess I was so hardened as to read over most of my faults with as much pleasure as another person would have read their perfections. And Lysander must excuse me if I still persist in some of them, at least till I am convinced that an alteration would contribute to his happiness. Especially may I avoid that freedom of behavior which consists in violations of decency. And permit me to tell you, sir, nor disdain to be a learner, that there is such a thing as modesty without either hypocrisy or formality. As to a neglect of singing, that I acknowledge to be a fault, which, if possible, shall not be complained of a second time, nor should you have had occasion for it now, if I had not a voice as harsh as the screech of a peacock. The capital fault shall be rectified, though not with any hopes of being looked upon as a beauty. To appear agreeable in the eyes of Lysander has been for years past, and still is, the height of my ambition. The fifth fault, I will endeavor to amend it. But you know, I think that a gentleman has no business to concern himself about the legs of a lady. The sixth and last can be cured only by a dancing school. But I must not write any more. I borrow a hint from you. Therefore, I will not add to my faults that of a tedious letter. A fault I had never yet reason to complain of in you, for however long, they never were otherwise agreeable to your own A. Smith.
We now jump ahead 12 years to July of 1776. John is in Philadelphia, having signed the Declaration of Independence just 2 short weeks before. During this period, he was typically working 18-hour days while serving on 90 committees in Congress and chairing 25 of them. Abigail is now in Boston, having herself and her 4 children, all under the age of 11, inoculated for smallpox. Imagine having to watch and care for herself and her children as they all experience the horrors and uncertainty of this disease, and to do so while living apart from one another. This would prove to be a very difficult period for them both, as John felt the responsibility of helping guide this new country through its infancy, while Abigail was bearing the enormous and frightening responsibility of keeping her family alive during the epidemic. While the deep affection between she and John is still evident, she was now Portia, the rich, beautiful, and intelligent heiress from Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice. There's a little less playfulness in the tone of the correspondence, as the weight of their respective responsibilities have left imprints on their lives.
Philadelphia, July 16th, 1776. In a letter from your Uncle Smith, I am informed that you were about taking the smallpox with all the children. It is not possible for me to describe more, nor for you to conceive my feelings upon this occasion. Nothing but the critical state of our affairs should prevent me from flying to Boston to your assistance. I can do no more than wish and pray for your health and that of the children. Never, never in my whole life had I so many cares upon my mind at once. I rely upon the tender care of our friends. I'm very anxious about supplying you with money. Spare for nothing. If you can get friends to lend it to you, I will repay with gratitude as well as interest any sum that you may borrow. I shall feel like a savage to be here, while my whole family is sick at Boston. But it cannot be avoided. I cannot leave this place without more injury to the public now than I ever could at any other time, being in the midst of scenes of business which must not stop for anything. Make anybody write to me, by every post. Don't miss one for any cause whatever. My dearest love to you all. July 20th. If you were too busy to write, I hoped that some kind of hand would have been found to let me know something about you. Do my friends think I have been a politician so long as to have lost all feeling? Do they suppose I've forgotten my wife and children? Or are they so panic-struck with the loss of Canada as to be afraid to correspond with me? Or have they forgotten that you have a husband and your children a father? What have I done or omitted to do that I should be thus forgotten and neglected in the most tender and affecting scene of my life? Don't mistake me, I don't blame you. Your time and thoughts must have been wholly taken up with your own and your family's situation and necessities. But 20 other persons might have informed me. I suspect that you intended to have run slyly through the smallpox with the family without letting me know it, and then have sent me an account that you were all well.
That might have been a kind intention, and if the design had succeeded, would have made me very joyous. But the secret is out, and I am left to conjecture. As the faculty have this distemper so much under command, I will flatter myself with a hope and expectation of soon hearing of your recovery.
Boston, July 13th, 1776. I must begin with apologizing to you for not writing since the 17th of June. I have really had so many cares upon my hands and mind, with a bad inflammation in my eyes, that I have not been able to write. I now date from Boston, where I yesterday arrived and was, with all 4 of our little ones, inoculated for the smallpox. Our little ones stood the operation manfully. Dr. Bullfinch is our physician. Such a spirit of inoculation never before took place. The town and every house in it are as full as they can hold. God grant that we may all go comfortably through the distemper. The physic part is bad enough, I know. I knew your mind so perfectly upon the subject that I thought nothing but our recovery would give you equal pleasure. The paper currency spread it everywhere. I immediately determined to set myself about it and get ready with my children. I wish it was so that you could have been with us, but I submit. July 14th. I had many disagreeable sensations at the thought of coming here myself, but to see my children through it I thought my duty, and all those feelings vanished as soon as I was inoculated, and I trust a kind Providence will carry me safely through. The little folks are very sick and puke every morning, but after that they are comfortable. I shall write you now very often. Pray inform me constantly of every important transaction. Every expression of tenderness is a cordial to my heart. Unimportant as they are to the rest of the world, to me, they are everything. All our friends desire to be remembered to you, and foremost in that number stands your Portia. July 21st. I have no doubt but that my dearest friend is anxious to know how his Portia does, and his little flock of children, under the operation of a disease once so formidable. I have the pleasure to tell him that they are all comfortable, though some of them complaining. Nabby has been very ill, but the eruptions begin to make appearance upon her and upon Johnny. Tommy is so well that the doctor inoculated him again today, fearing it had not taken. Charlie has no complaints yet, though his arm has been very sore. I received a letter from you, and though I think it a choice one, in the literary way, containing many useful hints and judicious observations which will greatly assist me in the future instruction of our little ones, yet it lacked some essential ingredients to make it complete. Not one word respecting yourself, your health, or your present situation. My anxiety for your welfare will never leave me but with my parting breath. 'Tis of more importance to me than all this world contains besides. The cruel separation to which I am necessitated cuts half of the enjoyments of life. The other half are comprised in the hope I have that what I do and what I suffer may be serviceable to you, to our little ones, and to our country. I must beseech you, therefore, for the future, never to omit what is so essential to my happiness. July 22nd. My own infirmities prevent me from writing. A most excruciating pain in my head and every limb and joint, I hope, portends a speedy eruption and prevents my saying more than that I am forever yours.
July 23rd. This morning's post brought me yours and has relieved me from a huge load of anxiety. I'm happy to hear that you are so comfortably situated, have so much agreeable company and such fine accommodations, I would very joyfully agree to have the smallpox over again for the sake of the company. This morning I enclosed a letter from Dr. Rush to me, containing directions for managing patients under inoculation for the smallpox. You will find several dull hours, and the children will fatigue you. But it pleased me so much to hear that nurse is there. You can't be low-spirited while she is there, and you can't possibly suffer for want of care. But I am somewhat afraid you have not nurses and servants enough in the house for so large a hospital. Dr. Cooper has promised to visit you and contribute all in his power to amuse you and make your stay agreeable. I love him more for this kindness. I loved him much before. How shall I get home? I feel every generous passion and every kind sentiment rushing for utterance, while I subscribe myself yours. July 27th. Disappointed again. The post brought me no letter from you, which I don't wonder at much, nor any intelligence concerning you, which surprises me a good deal. I hang upon tenterhooks. 15 days since you were all inoculated, and I have not yet learned how you have fared. But I will suppose you all better and out of danger. Why should I torture myself when I can't relieve you? It makes me happy to hear that the spirit of inoculation prevails so generally. I could wish it more universal. The smallpox has done us more harm than British armies, Canadians, Hanoverians, Hessians, and all the rest. We must conquer this formidable enemy without hesitation or delay. God bless you all. Adieu. July 29th. How are you all this morning? Sick, weak, faint, in pain, or pretty well recovered? By this time you are all well acquainted with the smallpox. Pray, how do you like it? We have no news. It is very hard that half a dozen armies can't supply us with news. We have a famine, a perfect dearth of this necessary article. Don't be in the dumps, above all things. I am hard put to it to keep out of them when I look at home. But I will be gay if I can. Adieu.
July 29th. I write you now, thanks be to heaven, free from pain, in good spirits, but weak and feeble. The smallpox acts very oddly this season. There are 7 of our number that have not yet had it. 3 out of our 4 children have been twice inoculated. 2 of them, Charles and Tommy, have had not one symptom. I have indulged them in rather freer living than before, and hope they will not long remain doubtful. Becky Peck, who has lived in the same manner with us, has it to such a degree as to be blind, with one eye swelled prodigiously. I believe she has 10,000. She is really an object to look at. Johnny has it exactly as one would wish, enough to be well satisfied and yet not to be troublesome. We sleep with windows open all night and lay upon the carpet or straw beds or anything hard. Abstain from spirits, salt, and fats. Fruit we eat all we can get, and those who like vegetables unseasoned may eat them, but that is not I. This doubtful business is very disagreeable, as it will detain us much longer. But there are several instances now of persons who thought that they had it and were recovered and lived away freely, and now are plentifully dealt by. Every physician has a number of patients in this doubtful state. I have not got rid of any terrors of the smallpox but that of not being liable to it again, which you will say is a very great one. But what I mean is that I should dread it more now than before I saw it. Dr. Sawyer of Newburyport lost a child 9 years old last week with a distemper, and Colonel Robinson of Dorchester lies extremely bad with a mortification in his kidneys. some such instances we must expect among such a variety of persons and constitutions. When I came into town, I was in great hopes that if we did well, we should be able to return in about 3 weeks. Now I fear it will be 5 weeks before we shall all get through. But I must not complain. When I cast my eye upon Becky, whose symptoms were not half so high as mine, or some of the rest of us, and see what an object she is, I am silenced and adore the goodness of God towards us. I believe you will be tired of hearing of smallpox, but you bid me write every post, and suppose you are anxious to hear how we have it. The next post I hope to tell you that they all have had it who now remain uncertain. I am at all times and in all states unfeignedly yours.
July 30th. You say I must tell you of my health and situation. As to the latter, my situation is as far removed from danger, I suppose, as yours. I never had an idea of danger here, nor a single sensation of fear. Delaware River is so well fortified that I have no suspicions of an enemy from sea, although vast numbers of people have removed out of this city into the country for fear of one. My health has lasted longer than I expected, but with intermissions of disorder, I fear, is departing. Increase of heat in the weather and of perplexity in business, if that is possible, have become too much for me. These circumstances, added to my concern for those other parts of myself in Boston, would certainly have carried me there before now if I could have got there. But I have no servant nor horse. I am now determined to go home, but the precise time I cannot fix. Adieu.
July 30th. As to myself, I am comfortable. Nabby, I hope, has gone through the distemper. The eruption was so trifling that to be certain I have had inoculation repeated. Charles was inoculated last Sabbath evening, a second time. Tommy today, the third time from some fresh matter taken from Becky Peck, who has enough for all the house beside. This suspense is painful. I know not what to do with them. It lengthens out the time, which I can but ill afford, and if they have it, I know not how to quit till I can get them through. Youth is the time. They have no pains but bodily, no anxiety of mind, no fears for themselves or others, and then the disease is much lighter. The poor doctor is as anxious as we are, but begs us to make it certain, if repeated inoculations will do it. There are now several patients who were inoculated last winter and thought they passed through, but now have taken it in the natural way. 'Tis a pestilence that walketh in darkness. 'Tis a poor business at best. Where I entertained one terror before, I do 10 now. I hope to be properly thankful that I and mine are so far comfortable. I think I have all my difficulties to grapple with alone and separate from my earthly prop and support. Oh, my dear friend, do you know how I feel when I look back upon a long absence? I look forward with the thought that this year is but half spent. I often recollect those lines, "Oh, you gods, annihilate but time and space, and make two lovers happy." August 1st. I will not omit telling you how we do, though I repeat over what I have written before. If I do, you must excuse it, as I forget one day what I wrote the day before. The smallpox is a great confuser of the mind. I am really put to it to spell the commonest words. I feel well myself, only much weakened and enfeebled. I want the air of the country, but cannot yet obtain it. No person who has had the smallpox can go beyond the guard.
Every person who comes into the town must be smoked there upon their return with all their money and papers. Tommy has been very feverish, but is now so well as to go to school. Charles II has taken, I think, but cannot be certain till next week. You complain of me. I believe I was to blame in not writing to you. I ought to have done it. I did not suspect you would hear of my intention till I told you myself. I had many cares upon my hands, many things to do for myself and family before I could leave. The time granted was only 10 days. I got here and then wrote you a very long letter. Since then I have scarcely omitted a post. You will have more reason to complain of being tired out. I received by the post a few lines from you. It really grieved me to find you so anxious. Your kindness in so often writing shall be returned in kind. I know not how you find the time amidst such a multitude of cares as surround you, but I feel myself more obliged by the frequent tokens of your remembrance. But you must not forget that, though my letters have much less merit, they have many more words, and I fill all the blank paper you send me. Adieu, most affectionately, your Portia.
August 3rd. You have made me very happy by the particular and favorable account you give me of all the family. But I don't understand how there are so many who have no eruptions and no symptoms. The inflammation of the arm might do, but without these, there is no smallpox. August 6th. Tell John he is a very lucky young gentleman to have it so much better than his mamma, his sisters, and brothers. How am I to get home, I don't know. I want the exercise of a journey so much that I must return soon. My health is so infirm that I can stay no longer.
August 5th. I received your 2 letters. I really am astonished at looking over the number I have received during this month. More, I believe, than for 3 months before. I hope 'tis your amusement and relaxation from care to be thus employed. It has been a feast to me during my absence from home and cheered me in my most painful moments. I have been trying all day to get time to write to you. I am now obliged to rob my sleep. I took the precaution of having all mine who had not the symptoms the 9th day inoculated a 2nd time, and I hope they have all passed through except Charlie. And what to do with him, I know not. I cannot get the smallpox to operate upon him. I have abundant reason to be thankful that we are so many of us carried comfortably through a disease so formidable in its natural operation, and though our symptoms have run high, yet they have been the worst, for the eruption itself has been a trifle. I hope to be able to return to Braintree next week, which will complete me 5 weeks. Adieu, dearest, best of friends. Adieu.
August 10th. I am happy to think that you and my oldest son are well through the distemper and have sufficient receipts. Nabby, I believe, is also through. The inflammation in her arm and the single eruption are nearly as much evidence as I had to show, and I have seen smallpox enough since I had it to have infected 100 armies. Charlie. My dear Charlie. I'm so sorry that it is still pretty clear that you have not taken it. But never fear, you will have it. This suspense and uncertainty must be very irksome to you. But patience and perseverance will overcome this, as well as all other difficulties. Don't think of time nor expense. 1,000 guineas is not worth so much as security to a wife, a good one I mean, and 4 children, good ones I mean, against the smallpox. It is a very great thing for a whole family to get well over it. At the same time, that I am in a state of suspense, uncertainty, and anxiety about my best, dearest, worthiest, wisest friend in this world, and all my children. I am in a state of equal suspense, uncertainty, and anxiety about our country and posterity. The lives of thousands and the liberties of millions are as much in suspense as the health of my family. But I submit to the governance of infinite wisdom.
August 12th. When I first came to town, I was made to believe that the smallpox was a very light disorder, and one might pass through it with little or no complaints. Some such instances no doubt there are, and light it is in comparison of the natural way. As I never saw the disease before, I have with those much more experienced been deceived in it now. Nabby was the first person who had complaints of our number. She was cold and shivery. Then a violent heat ensued. The doctor supposed it the symptoms of the disorder. A day or two after, she had 3 eruptions upon one of her eyes. I thought it did not appear like what I had seen, which they called smallpox. However, I submitted my judgment to those who knew better. But when I found someone who were inoculated at the same time failing, I requested the doctor to inoculate her again. Symptoms she has had very severely and very different from what she had before, and smallpox in plenty. She can reckon 500 already. I have broke through my resolution of not having Charles inoculated again. I saw I must tarry for Nabby long enough to make another trial upon him, and have accordingly done it. My affairs at home, which for 3 weeks I laid asleep, wake up now and make me anxious to get there. I fear they will go to ruin. My expenses here, too, for so long a time will be much more than I expected, for I thought to be at home in a month at furthest. I close, rejoicing in the prospect I have of soon seeing you. Ever yours.
August 14th. I congratulate you all upon your agreeable prospects. Even my pathetic little hero Charles, I hope, will have the distemper finally. It is very odd that the doctor can't put infection enough in his veins. It is unaccountable to me that he has not taken it in the natural way before now. I am under little apprehension, prepared as he is, if he should. I am concerned about you much more. So many persons about you, sick, the children troublesome, your mind perplexed, yourself weak. The situation must be disagreeable. The country air and exercise, however, will refresh you.
August 14th. Nabby has enough of the smallpox for all the family beside. She is pretty well covered. Not a spot but what is so sore that she can neither walk, sit, stand, or lay without any comfort. She is as patient as one can expect, but they are a very sore sort. If it was a disorder to which we could be subject more than once, I would go as far as it was possible to avoid it. I live in daily expectation of seeing you here. Your health, I think, requires your immediate return. Nabby is poorly this morning. 600 or 700 boils are no agreeable feeling. You and I know not what a feeling it is. I had but 3. The town, instead of being clear of this distemper, are now in the height of it. Hundreds having it in the natural way through the deceitfulness of inoculation. Adieu, ever yours. Breakfast waits. Portia.
August 20th. I wish Mrs. Nabby joy that she has at last receipt in full. It is much better than to be in doubt. Charles, never fear, Charles. You will have it yet, and as good a receipt as any of them. The doctors cannot account for the numerous failures of inoculation. I can. No physician has either head or hands enough to attend 1,000 patients. He can neither see that the matter is good, nor that the thread is properly covered with it, nor that the incision is properly made, nor anything else. I wish you had taken Dr. Tufts for your physician and no other. I never liked your man. I like him now less than ever. I wish you would all come to Philadelphia and have the distemper here, and then I should not be uneasy about getting home. I beg pardon for this flight about your doctor. I may have done him wrong, but I am afraid you have suffered from his being of rather too much importance in the present scarcity of physicians. With regard to my health, as the extreme heat of the weather has abated, I am better than I was, but not well.
August 17th. I hope this will meet you upon your return to New England, where I assure you, I think you are wanted. As to our hospital today, Nabby has not been out of her chamber these 3 days. Neither can she stand or sit her foot to the floor. She has above 1,000 pustules as large as great green peas. She is, the doctor says, in a good way, though 'tis hard to make her think so. Charles complains some today. I hope 'tis the symptoms. I have had a siege of it. I long for the campaign to be over. I have not had time to enter upon any subject which requires attention, and can only add that I am ever yours, Portia.
August 25th. I hope it will not be my fate to be sick here. Indeed, I am not much afraid of these acute disorders. Mine are more chronical, nervous, and slow. Nabby, by this time I conclude, is well. And Charles, I hope, is broke out.
August 18th. At present, all my attention is taken up with the care of our little Charles, who has been very bad. The symptoms rose to a burning fever. A stupefaction and delirium ensued for 48 hours. The doctor attended him as though he had been his own child. He has taken the distemper in the natural way. A most plentiful eruption has taken place. Though everything has been done to lessen it that could, his face will be quite covered. Many, if not all, will run together. He is yet a very ill child, though his symptoms are lessened. I would not have alarmed you. I hope he is not dangerous, but we cannot tell the event. Heaven grant that it may be favorable. I will write to you by Wednesday post. I shall see then how he is like to be, and can form a better judgment of him. Nabby can walk today without borrowing my shoes and stockings. Adieu, ever yours.
August 28th. Your letter has fixed an arrow in my heart which will not be drawn out until the next post arrives. And then, perhaps, instead of being withdrawn, it will be driven deeper. My sweet babe, Charles, is never out of my thoughts. Gracious heaven preserve him. The symptoms you describe are so formidable that I am afraid almost to flatter myself with hope. Why should I repine? Why should I grieve? He is not mine, but conditionally, and subject to the will of a superior whose will be done. I shall enclose with this a pamphlet entitled The Present Method of Inoculating for the Smallpox. This pamphlet is recommended to me as containing the best method and that which is practiced by the greatest masters in this city. I send this as a present to you, but you must lend it to Dr. Tufts. I have not had time to read it.
August 22nd. I have been in town 6 weeks yesterday. Charlie is better. He is exceeding full, but the little creature is as patient as a lamb. We carry him into the air all we can. In the height of the dog days, a very bad time for smallpox, but we think he will do well. I hope to be able to get home by next week. I shall rejoice exceedingly. Nabbies are most all turned. She looks speckled. Adieu, ever yours, Portia. August 25th. I fear you will think me negligent and inattentive. If I had been at home, I should have been sooner in a capacity to have assisted you. I was talking of sending for you and trying to procure horses for you when little Charles, who lay upon the couch covered over with smallpox, and nobody knew that he had heard or regarded anything which was said, lifted up his head and says, "Mamma, take my dollar and get a horse for Papa." Poor fellow has had a tedious time of it, as well as I. But 'tis now upon the turn, and he is much easier and better. I hope I shall be able to get out of town Saturday next. Mr. and Mrs. Cranch with their children went out Friday. I feel rather lonely. Ever, ever yours, Portia.
August 30th. Amidst all my concern for the army, my dear Charles is continually present to my mind. I did not know what fast hold that little prattler Charles had upon me before. Give my love to my little speckled beauty Nabby. Tell her I am glad she is like to have a few pits. She will not look the worse for them. If she does, she will learn to prize looks less and ingenuity more. John and Tom, hardy fellows. I have hardly had occasion to feel at all anxious about them. I think I have a right, and that it is my duty to take a little respite and relaxation. If my life and health is of any use to the public, it is necessary for the public as well as for me that I should take a little rest in order to preserve them.
August 29th. Dearest friend, I have spent the 3 days past almost entirely with you. The weather has been stormy, I have had little company, and I have amused myself in my closet reading over the letters I have received from you since I have been here. Here I have amused myself in reading and thinking of my absent friend, sometimes with a mixture of pain, sometimes with pleasure, sometimes anticipating a joyful and happy meeting, whilst my heart would bound and palpitate with the pleasing idea, and with the purest affection I have held you in my bosom till my whole soul has dissolved in tenderness, and my pen fallen from my hand. How often do I reflect with pleasure that I hold in possession a heart equally warm with my own, and who even now, whilst he is reading here, feels all I describe. Forgive this reverie, this delusion, and suffer me to enjoy and indulge in ideal pleasures, and tell me they are not inconsistent with the stern virtue of a senator and a patriot. I wish for peace and tranquility. All my desires and all my ambition is to be esteemed and loved by my partner, to join with him in the education and instruction of our little ones, to set under our own vines in peace, liberty, and safety. Adieu, my dearest friend. Soon return to your most affectionate Portia. Braintree, September 7th. This is a beautiful morning. I see it with joy and, I hope, thankfulness. I came here with all my treasure of children, having passed through one of the most terrible diseases to which human nature is subject, and not one of us is wanting. I think 'tis near a 12-month since the pestilence raged here. I pray God preserve you and return you in health. I am most affectionately yours,